my dad is a very loving man. Like, my dad, no matter what, like I walk through the house every day, my dad grabs me and hugs me and just embraces me and tells me, esto es lo que me da fuerza. Like, like
Wow.
hugging you gives me strength. Like it
Wow.
really does.
Hello, guys. Welcome back to a new episode for Finding Purpose, where we talk about navigating grief and how we can navigate grief in healthier ways and eventually live a more purposeful life. I'm your host, Tulio Hidalgo, and today I'm joined with a good friend who I met last year on a public speaking class, and we connected very well, and we're gradually building this friendship. His name is Erik Martin. How are
Hello,
you,
hello.
Erik?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank
I'm
you for
excited
being
to
here.
be here and share some intellectualness with you.
Thank you. Yeah, just before we started recording, we took a couple breaths because I think it's important our presence, and how present we are, and that allows us to offer the most value as we're having this conversation and as you guys are listening. So as you guys heard in the beginning, I mentioned the word of grief. Before I've been talking about loss, but grief I feel like connects more with what we're talking about here. Grief is more of that internal experience we go through when we lose someone or when we are having the lack of presence of someone in our life. Or in many cases here in Miami, mostly when a lot of people move from a different country to a new country and leave a country behind, leave people behind, and that creates a grief process inside of us of, trying to understand that this people or this country is not going to be in our life anymore, um, in the way that we were used to, and so we have to learn to navigate through those experiences. Now, Erik, I would love for you to share a little bit of your background and who you are today.
Well, I am an only child of, well, not an only child, sorry. I'm an only boy of two girls. I'm the youngest child, and our age gap is ginormous. My second oldest sister is 6 years older than me. She's 26, and my oldest sister is 37, so about 11 or 12 years older than me. I grew up mostly in my house with just my mom and my sister. My dad was a truck driver when I was growing up. He would drive out of state most of the time, spend at least a month at a time, not being home. So I grew up with my sister and my mom mostly. Other than that, to me, I think I like to lift. Fitness is my outlet in life right now, and I'm just trying to learn. I'm just a learner. I'm just trying to be a student in life. I'm just trying to. As a matter of fact, you taught me that I feel like you can always be better. You could always be a student in life, and you can always learn more. And I would say I'm a student. I just want to live life trying to be better.
I think that's a great point, man, because I think a lot of people, they think about, okay, I want to get to this point, and when I'm in that point, I'll be successful or I'm done. And it's like, no, like, yes, we have to set ourselves goals and set ourselves accomplishments that we want to complete. But that can't be the end. We have to continuously have an open mind to continue
course.
on learning, because that's what's going to allow us to really grow and to really let our full potential come out. Now, you mentioned that you mainly grew with your sister and with your mom because your dad was a truck driver, so the most of the time he was out
Providing.
in the providing
Yeah.
and driving. Now, even though his purpose, was to provide for the family, obviously that still led a lack of his presence in you. So, how did you navigate through that?
Well, I navigated through that very immaturely. I think my parents did an amazing job, raising me. I think they gave me everything that they could, especially in times when they couldn't even afford to. They still decided to give me what I wanted. But I navigated through that with with a persona of a spoiled brat. I feel like my young self took advantage subconsciously of the fact that I only had my mother around and my sister. And it's not to call mothers weak and to say that mothers are weak, because mothers are strong. Mothers are the strongest people on this planet.
Mm.
But when you're a child, I feel like you take advantage of your mother because a mother's figure isn't as authoritative as a father figure. And I feel like that led to me growing up a little bit of a spoiled brat. But you live and you learn and you mature. And I feel like that's how I navigated through that. And it did have its consequences because acting like a brat at home, decided to reflect that in school. You know, I would act like a brat in school. I would get horrible grades. Teachers would call my mom day and night. You know, I was such a brat in school. I had teachers crying due to my behavior. And like I said, you live and you learn. Obviously, I regret acting like that and navigating through life like that, and just projecting like that. But you know, you change and you mature, and that's why we're here.
That is why we're here. And so that leads me to think about a following question, and is what have you learned from those experiences?
Growing up like that, I feel like it led to me living life for a long time without being present and without doing things with intent and acting very impulsive. You know, when you're a little kid, you're curious and you do everything with impulsiveness. You know, you see a red toy, you want to grab the red toy. You don't even think about the consequences of grabbing the red toy because it might be another kid's or something. And that's how I feel like I lived life up until, honestly, unfortunately, a long amount of time. But I lived life like that up until maybe in my 11th grade. And I just lived life just doing what I thought would just benefit me temporarily, and just doing anything that it seemed fun to me instead of things that would benefit me truly.
And like, what do you think nurtured that mindset? What do you think kept you in that behavior?
So I think what kept me in that behavior was no consequences. Like I said, I grew up mostly with my dad not being home. My dad, you know, I'm not saying that my dad was missing in my life, because my dad did put in his part. But like I said, for a long time of my life, he was just providing. But though, wait, I'm sorry. What was your question
like
again?
what nurtured that?
Oh,
that
okay.
behavior?
So yeah, so I feel like no consequences after my actions. You know, normally a kid behaves bad in school or gets bad grades, and they have consequences. Maybe they get their phone taken away. Maybe they get grounded. For me, it was more of a threat, like, oh, I'm gonna take your stuff away. They would. But then when I would come back home from school, I'd be like, oh, please, like, I'll do better. And they would immediately give it back. And I'm not blaming my parents.
Yeah.
You know, I was born with, when I was born, my parents were 40 years old. And they tell me now, like, oh, when you were born, we were just at an age where, like, us trying to like, try like that in that aspect, they were just tired of it already. You know, 40 years old is not old, but it's middle age to have children and to give your full effort. And at the same time, I was an accident. Like, I didn't happen on purpose. I wasn't planned.
I would say accident.
Well, I
but
wasn't
yeah,
planned.
like,
I wasn't planned. And yeah, so I feel like the lack of consequences after my actions in school just led to me being immature and not doing things with a clear head and just being impulsive.
So, what would you say? You said up until 11th grade, you were involved in that sort of behavior. What was that moment of like realization that you had that made you change?
Well, I matured a lot when I met my girlfriend, like my current girlfriend today. I think when I met her was when I matured the most, because she started to explain to me this aspect of reflecting on your feelings and really considering the actions that you do. And I feel like that started to make me think before I acted, you know, like, okay, I'm going to do this for my girlfriend, but like, or I might do this instead of doing this with my girlfriend. Let me think how that might affect my girlfriend. And that habit of like that started to turn into a habit of, you know, thinking of what might happen after my decisions and planning my decisions and what might happen afterwards. And that's when I just started to become more aware, you know, like I just started to be more present with my decisions and the things I would say to people.
So your girlfriend has played a big role in this realization
Yes.
that you have gone through, and comparing yourself to that student that was in 11th grade to now, what would you say has been the biggest changes that you've made?
So before I met my girlfriend, like I did, I don't want to say I was a substance abuser, but I did smoke, I did drink, quite often. You know, I feel like subconsciously, like without realizing it, I was using it as an outlet. You know, I was working out at the time, but not like how I am today, but I was smoking quite often and drinking quite often, and just using that to relieve myself. And I was surrounded by people that, were kind of toxic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're there in that situation in life, you don't really realize it that they're toxic. But something in me always wanted something else, something different. But subconsciously, I didn't think, or consciously, I didn't think, oh, like I can't hang out with these people anymore. That's not what I would think. I would just kind of think like, oh, I want my life to be better. I want something more out of life. Like I can't just spend my whole life doing this. I can't just spend my whole life sitting around with people smoking and just relieving myself like this. And that's what changed me a lot. Like I feel like that was the pivot point that I hit that made a drastic difference.
It's like this new awareness
Yeah.
of I want more from life.
Exactly.
And the point that I always talk about in my personal experience, and is living to honor. You know, when I experienced when I was navigating through my own personal grief, I had to ask myself, is the way that I'm living my life today honoring my mother? And at that time, when I asked myself this question, I was maybe 15 years old, which was around the time where she had passed away. And during that time, I was also smoking quite often, drinking quite often, being around the wrong people. I was there. And when I asked myself this question, it was that turning point, made me reflect on how I was living my life, if I was genuinely living to honor her. So I think it's an important realization to have, an important question to ask. I think the questions we ask ourselves during these experiences either keep us in our behavior, or they can help us grow out of those behaviors.
Of course.
So and I think the people that we have around us is an important role into our development
Very
and how we're
important.
navigating through that. And so that's, I think, another important point, that when I speak to people, it's a point where they have a lot of challenge to move from those groups. So what helped you move from a group that wasn't helping you to now a group that it's more nurturing to your development?
Well, what helped me
Yeah.
growing up, I've always been very social. I'm one of those people that I could really, like, I can change my persona and my personality depending, like, not depending honestly on anybody. I might meet somebody with certain interests, and I could work on that. Like, like, you have certain interests. I don't have any friends with those type of interests, but I find it cool that you have those interests. So I can relate that with you, and my personality and my friendships with people has always been very diverse. I can
Mm.
be I truly believe I can be friends
Mm.
with anybody, and I can get along with anybody. And that aspect helped me have multiple friendships. I always had one main group of friends that I hung out with, which was that group of friends that I would smoke with and
Mhm.
stuff. And the reason I hung out with them the longest, I mean the most, was because I knew them the longest.
Mm.
That was like, I've known those guys since sixth grade, and there's nothing that gives you more comfort than somebody you've known for a long time. Somebody that you look at like as a brother.
Mm.
And but at the same time, I had multiple friend groups. I had another friend group that, like, I would go to the gym with, and just talk about different things with,
Mhm.
because they had different certain interests. And when I separated myself from that first group because I wanted to stop smoking and I wanted to stop drinking, I started hanging out with that other friend
Mm.
group. And that other friend group lasted me a long time too, but I feel like it was just a time for me to have a journey of, like, solitude, be on my own a little bit more. And
Mm.
now it's a case of, like, I really only talk to one friend, which is my friend, my best friend Joseph. He's like a brother to me, and my girlfriend. And those two people, like, they really do make it feel like I'm not alone when I talk to them, because of how much we get along. But you do have moments where you're like, oh, I don't really have many friends anymore. and it kind of strikes you back, and you're like, whoa. But I've learned to live with it, and I've learned to appreciate it, and right now I'm on a journey to embrace solitude and just to be better when I'm alone.
I think that's such an important phase, such an important not only phase. I don't want to because I don't want to cut it to a phase because I think it's broader than that. I think having a solitude, having an experience where you can be fulfilled with yourself and spend time with yourself, I think is so important because I think our relationship with ourselves reflects how we relate to others. You know, so if we can't have a good relationship with ourselves, if we can't enjoy the time with ourselves, so it's gonna be very hard to enjoy our times with others. And I think as we start maturing, we also begin to select the people we hang out with a lot more wisely. Um, you know,
Yeah,
so
that's sorry to cut you off, but that's a really good point you just brought up, like being selective of the people you hang out with now, because now I since I have more awareness and since I have more uh more emotional intelligence, like I could pick up on signs that people give off when I first meet them and the way they act, maybe towards others, maybe towards me, or just the things they simply say. And because of that, like now I'm way more selective with the people that I choose to hang out with voluntarily, because at the end of the day, I don't want to spend time with somebody that isn't on the same journey as me in the aspect of like trying to be better, trying to grow in all aspects. You know what I mean? And when I meet somebody that really isn't worried about that and they have the wrong priorities, that's them. That they're in that part of their life right now, and they're not a bad human being for that. That's understandable. But what am I gonna do spending time with somebody that has the wrong priorities? I can't give them the right priorities. I can't tell them what their right priorities should be. That's for them to decide. Exactly. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, 100%. Um, just today I was having a conversation, and and we were talking about the same topic, and I brought up the fact that it is not a selfish thing to select the people that we want to involve in our life. And I say that because I think a lot of people can think that it's selfish to select who you're going to add in your life, and it's not at all. And sometimes we need to leave certain people behind, and that's also a choice. And some I feel like a lot of people, what stops them from making that choice because they may feel bad for that other person. But then I always have this thought of how much damage are you doing with staying friends with them and not making the decision to move forward. And what I mean by that is because at times when we leave those people behind, when we remove those people from our life, that also gives an opportunity for them to reflect. How am I living my life? Why did this person not it's not in my life anymore? And it makes them it can give them an opportunity to internally reflect on how they're living their life.
Of course.
So I think this is an important point. Now I want to segue a little bit into gratitude. You said the word gratitude earlier, and um, I wanted to ask you about that. What role does gratitude play in your life?
Just I think gratitude plays a huge part. I think the at the end of the day, I always pray. I always pray before I go to sleep. I make sure to always pray to God, because that's what I believe in. And the first thing, or at least the main thing that I always try to tell God in my prayer is to thank Him for everything that I have and to be grateful and to have gratitude, because so many people wake up in a house with a roof over their head, in a bed that has clean sheets, with a water bottle right next to them when they wake up, with their MacBook or their phone charging, and people are so used to that lifestyle that they just overlook it, and they don't stop to think like, wow, I'm so blessed and I should be so grateful for the things that I have. So I think it plays a huge part, because when you start to reflect and you start to really pause and think, wow, like look at all the things I have, simply just by taking a look at your room, and you start to look at all these things you have in your room, you're like, wow, like I should be so much more grateful for the things that I have. just by simply having a dresser with a mirror on it. You know how many kids out there don't have that?
Mm.
How many kids have to share rooms with family members because they don't have the luxury of having their own private room to themselves? I have a room with my own bathroom. That's a luxury in and of itself. So many people don't go through that. I have my own closet. I have a closet full of clothes. So many people have to wear the same outfit every day because they simply don't have the money to have more clothes. I can leave my room in the middle of the night and open a fridge that's full of food, and that's a luxury, And that's why I say that gratitude is huge. Being grateful for all the things you have, and just stopping and pausing and look around your house and think, not everybody has this. Even if your house is itty bitty small, trust me, it could always be worse. It could always be worse. And luckily, and thank God, I've never had to live through that. But it could always be worse. So it's very important to have gratitude for those things.
Yeah, I agree with you. And all the things that you mentioned, for a lot of people, you say they're so used to it that they can't see it. They can't see truly the value that these things have. Even though they may seem small, they are so big, and when we really are grateful for these things, I think it makes life more meaningful.
Of course.
And I think it allows us to really live with gratitude, really nurture the state of gratitude. And when I think of gratitude, I also think about how I'm investing my time. And if I'm investing my time with the people that I truly love, that I'm truly grateful to have in my life. Because one thing is to say it out loud and express it, which I think is important. But then I think there's the other side where it's the action. Am I investing time with people that I love? And I think that's a great way to live in gratitude.
That just reminded me of something, because you said you want to invest time with people that you're grateful to have in your life, and that reminds me of my girlfriend, because I tell my girlfriend when I grow up and I'm financially stable, I would love to move from Florida. I would love to go to a state where I can maybe experience all 4 seasons. Really see snow, and just live somewhere else, for a change, a drastic change in my life. Because if I'm being honest, I'm not a huge fan of living in Miami, just because of how loud it is. I like quietness every once in a while. And when I express that idea with her, she tells me that she doesn't know if she wants to do that because she wants to spend time with her family growing up. She wants to have children and have them grow up with her family and stuff. And she wants to experience her parents and enjoy them for as much as for as long as she can. And she has such a good point, a good valid point, because people like myself are so quick to want to get away nowadays. It's and I think that's where gratitude comes in as well. Be grateful for what you have here. Be grateful for what you have around you right now, and don't be so quick to get away from that and to give up on it, because when you go away from it, you start to regret it a little bit. I feel like some people move away and they kind of regret it for a little bit, because they're like, wow, I moved away from my parents so quick, and I could have experienced so many great memories with them, if I really took advantage of it.
Yeah, I think that certain people can have their reasonable motives, and it can be very depending on the situation.
Of course.
But I do think, and your girlfriend's approach to this, I think, is very interesting. Now, I wanted to backtrack a little bit when you were talking about growing up and having your father, mainly be on the road. How is your relationship with your dad now?
My relationship with my dad now is great. Honestly, he stopped going out of state as a truck driver. He still is a truck driver, but now he does local, which is in the state of Florida. But that aspect of him being out of the state a month at a time, it helped me to value my dad a lot more. And when my dad would come around, I would always want to be with my dad. And my dad is a very loving man. My dad, no matter what, I walk through the house every day. I can count on it that it's going to happen. My dad grabs me and hugs me and just embraces me and tells me, esto lo que me da fuerza.
Wow.
Hugging you gives me strength. It really does. And so, my relationship with my father now is amazing. And it's something that I'm so grateful for, because as a man, having a father figure is important. You know, having a father figure is important, and I really look up to my dad, and he's very admirable because I know what my dad has gone through in life.
Mm.
So knowing what he's gone through in life and knowing where he is today is very admirable. So I I I I genuinely try to have a good relationship with my dad.
Man, it gave me goosebumps, hearing uh, what your dad
Yeah,
tells you, when you get home. This is what gives me strength. I think it truly shows the type of person he is. That's incredible, and you're lucky to have that.
thank you.
Not everybody can get home and have their dad hug them and tell them those words.
That's very true.
So I think that's definitely something to be very grateful for, and I'm happy that through all this time that he was in his presence, that now he is. You said that now you're able to value him more, and that you're more grateful to have him around. And I think that's something that helps us navigate grief. Like seeing that even though we went through these experiences, now we have these blessings.
Of
Now
course.
in this case, now he is back home more often. And you get to spend time with him. So I think it's being able to have the capacity to, even as we're experiencing challenging moments, and in this case grief, also looking at the positives. Okay, what do I still have on my life? You know, I want to talk about a bit of purpose. What would you say gives you purpose in your life?
My purpose as in life is, I would say my purpose in life is, we've talked about it
Mm,
before, is leaving legacy behind. You know, leaving something behind. Just just giving value to yourself and something that your future family could look at and be proud of it. You know, I that's something that drives me today. Just something generational,
mm,
and and being somebody to create that. You know, that's what drives me. That's what gives me purpose. Other than God, but that's what
mm.
gives me purpose. You know, leaving something behind and giving my kids and my kids' kids and even more after that something to look forward to. And and legacy. Legacy is my purpose.
Legacy. And so what would you say motivates you to want to leave this legacy?
What motivates me to leave legacy is the fact that up until now, my family hasn't had legacy. You know, my father comes from Cuba, so does my mother,
Mm,
and their parents before that and their parents before that didn't leave anything behind for them because they lived in a certain time during
mm,
Cuba where that really didn't exist. You know,
mm.
leaving a legacy behind, and I want to be the first one to leave a legacy behind. You know, I have two other siblings. You know, like it could always not be me, but
Mm,
as of thing like as of for now, like
mm,
the way things are going, it most likely will be me
mm,
because I don't see anybody else planning to leave a
mm.
legacy behind. But that's okay. I'm not blaming them
Mm.
for that. But that's what my purpose
Yeah,
is in
yeah,
my
it's your
family.
desire. What would you say ignited that purpose, that goal to leave a legacy? Like, what was that moment you were like, man, I want to leave a legacy for my family?
So now that we mention it, I've always loved history. Like I've always been like a big history guy. You know, not that I can name anything from the history right now, and you could ask me a certain question, and I know the correct answer. But something that like fascinated me from history is that hundreds and hundreds of years later, we still know this man's name
Mm,
that we don't even have a photo of, but just paintings of and books written of him. And that fascinated me, like how people's names are just honored throughout life because of the impact they made, you know. And that motivates me, you know, like, you know, being remembered. Like I think that really motivates me. And they were all remembered in their own way, and that just makes me like that helps me know that I can be remembered in my own way. Now, I'm not saying that I want to leave a legacy behind and be remembered by the whole world, but I do want to be remembered by my family. You know, my bloodline, you know, going down further into my bloodline, I want them to know why they have the things they have, and I want
mm,
them to look back on me and think, okay, this is why we have what we have. So that's what I mean by being remembered.
yeah. And how would you want your family to remember you?
Well, with wealth, I say I guess I want them to. Well, not I guess I know that I want them to remember me by wealth. You know, I want them to look around like how I do today, and be grateful for the things they have, and be curious. You know, and be curious as to why they have what they have, and when they ask themselves why do we have what we have, it would like the answer would be me. You know, we have what we have because I decided to work hard and I decided to put myself in that like in that aspect of life where I put my head down and I worked and I earned what we had today. So when they look around and they decide to want to be grateful and they want to look around to be grateful for the things they have, and they get that moment of curiosity, they ask themselves, why do we have what we have? Maybe they ask their mom and dad, maybe they ask their grandparents, hey grandpa, hey grandma, why do we have what we have today? Like why do we have such great wealth? And they'll answer and they'll say it was because of me.
And so, how do you think that's going to impact their own growth?
Hopefully it impacts them in a good way,
Yeah.
in a positive way. Hopefully, if it all goes according to plan, hopefully my story to them is motivating and hopefully it makes them want to do the same thing. You know, hopefully what I have or what they have from me, then they decide, you know, to expand it. You know, life is, the world is huge. You know, you could always expand. You could always have more. Now, that's not the whole purpose of life of just wanting more and more and more, you know, but hopefully it motivates them to want to do something with their life with that, you know?
Totally. You mentioned that the gym has been or is your one of your biggest outlets, and is one thing that you, I'm sure, are very passionate about as well. What role would you say the gym and fitness plays in your life?
The role that that's played in my life is that if you could get yourself to go to the gym and voluntarily put yourself through that pain of going till failure, of going till your body just hurts and you can't anymore, if you can put yourself through that voluntarily, then you can put yourself through anything voluntarily. And you can genuinely put yourself through any hardship and trial to be what you want to be. And I realized that when I started to go, and I fell in love with it. You know, I fell in love with the aspect of like, if I could do this, like I could really do anything. Because what stops me from studying more hours? If I could bring myself here and genuinely hurt myself, because at the end of the day, lifting hurts, you know. But if I could hurt myself genuinely and see and do it because I know that there will be progress, why can't I study more and work harder if there's going to be progress, just not the same type of progress?
Yeah, it's in a way, what I'm hearing is that it helps us build confidence in ourselves.
Exactly.
Build confidence that if we can put ourselves through this, in this case, it's more of a physical pain. Why can I not put myself through psychological pain as well? And when I say it, I don't know if pain illustrates the right context of what we're trying to say, but it helps us to become a resilient. You know, into the things that we expose ourselves to, and do those harder things that we need to do to progress.
Exactly.
You know, now with building the legacy that you want to create, is the fitness world, is the gym, is that something that it's aligned to the legacy you want to leave behind?
Well, hopefully, at the end of the day, I love fitness and I love to lift because I simply just have a passion for it, you know. And I also feel like I have a passion for lifting and bodybuilding and stuff like that because I've always been a competitive person. And anytime I did anything, I always wanted to do it to like the greatest level I could, and or at least fall in love with the greatest level of it. So I used to play baseball and I would watch the MLB like days on end. You know, I used to play video games, and I was very competitive about video games, and I would constantly spend hours just watching people play video games because I wanted to be a professional video game player. So anything I did, I just always wanted to be great at it. So when I started working out, I started like thinking to myself, okay, like, you know, what's like the greatest level of working out? Because like, you know, that's what I like to do. So I found out about bodybuilding, and that's where my passion grew for that. Now, for my children and my children's children, I don't know if that would necessarily align, because I don't know what my children and my children's children or my grandkids, what their passions would be.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're very artistic, maybe they're very paper smart. You know, maybe some of them have a passion for law or medicine, and that's what they like to do. Maybe one of them has passion for, you know, drawing and coloring or singing, and that's okay. If that's your passion, pursue it. But I wouldn't necessarily say that my passion for lifting and bodybuilding aligns with my legacy.
Okay.
But I would say it aligns in one aspect, and it's that working out and lifting and bodybuilding, it helps me, like, it keeps me grounded, you know, and it gives me that resilience that you mentioned earlier, and it allows me to keep moving forward in life. So it aligns in the aspect that it's what's helping me to create that legacy, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, it's helping you. It's part of, I guess, one of the tools that you're using to
Exactly.
build what that legacy you want to create. You know, now you brought up bodybuilding. Is that a goal of yours in the athletic, I guess you could say, industry or world?
Hopefully, I need to work on my discipline a little bit more, but I would love to do it at some point. I would love to do it, and I would mostly, instead of actual bodybuilding myself, I would love to coach bodybuilders. Like, that's something that really, really piques my interest. Because I love to, like, every once in a while I'll go to the gym with my friends, and I love to coach my friends. Not in the aspect of, like, they pay me, but, like, I love to teach them about certain workouts they could do, or a certain form they could use on a workout, and to help them get a few more reps in. But there's a difference between doing that with people that already know how to work out than doing it with people that don't know how to work out and teaching them how to work out. If I'm being completely honest, I don't have the patience for that, because it's like teaching a toddler how to walk, you know, like, and I get very frustrated, if I'm being completely honest, when I'm trying to teach somebody how to work out. And I think there's something about coaching somebody that's already at that professional level, that they know what you're trying to say. You know, they get the motivation that you're trying to give them. You know, you tell them, come on, a few more reps, and they want to do those few more reps, because they're gonna have progress and benefit from it. So when I think about bodybuilding, I would most likely want to be a coach, but at the professional level.
Now, what sort of discipline does a bodybuilder need to implement to stay performing?
And the discipline that a bodybuilder needs is just, I want to say, it's all mental, and it is physical. Don't get me wrong, because they need to work out and they need to bring themselves to working out every day. But if there's one thing I learned in pursuing fitness and nutrition, it's that the working out part gets easy, because at some point you start to have such a strong passion for it and such a strong love for it, that you fall in love with working out. You know, you, at the end of school or at the end of your day of work, you know, you're excited to go work out. You're like, yo, I can finally go and work out. Like, I've been waiting all day to have a workout. You know, I've had all my meals. You know, I'm excited to work out today. Today's leg day. Like, I'm going to go hard on leg day. The hard part is the nutrition, because you have to genuinely get yourself to eat possibly 4 to 5 meals a day, possibly more if you're bulking. And the meals are not going to be as good as you think they are. You know, they're going to taste bad. You know, I don't know if you've ever had egg white from a carton, but egg whites from a carton, when you cook them, they're like wet and like watery. And sometimes that'll just be your meal, just egg white, because you need something with a lot of protein and low calories. And you're eating those and you're gagging a little bit. You're like, yo, this is nasty. Like, it actually is nasty, but you have to get yourself to eat it. You have to. And that's the discipline that I'm talking about, you know, because you can be starving, because it's happened to me. I'll be starving sometimes, and I'd rather starve and not eat, but not get my calories in and not get my protein in, than eat a plate of egg whites, eat another 10 ounces of chicken with ketchup and mayo. You know, like, that's nasty. I'd rather just starve and just not eat. But at the end of the day, I have to get myself to eat.
Yeah, so it becomes more of a building a resilience to staying on your diet to get the meals you need to get in, than really showing up to the gym. I was thinking about, like, you brought up the coaching professional bodybuilders, and how that comparing it to coaching someone who's just starting to work out, the patience levels is different because how you said the high performer knows what they're doing, so coaching them would be a different process. And I related a lot to what you just said because me as a life coach, as someone who works with people, um, as a coach, you're working with high performance people, comparing it to, let's say, a psychologist who's working with people who are maybe just starting to get up in their feet, who are overcoming things from the past. And so that's definitely something I had to ask myself, what sort of people do I want to work with?
That's amazing.
And coming from a background also from playing soccer, being around high performance athletes, you know, and seeing the sort of challenges that a high performance athlete goes through and helping those athletes and my teammates in that case, I think was very fulfilling. And that also gave me more insight into the type of people I want to work with. So
that's amazing. I feel like growing up with sports helps a lot. Honestly, like I think growing up and playing sports helped me a lot with who I am today, because I think like growing up and being around sports just naturally puts competitiveness in you, and like it becomes part of your nature. And at the end of the day, being competitive and that it just being natural to you makes you strive for more out of life. And I think honestly, like me growing up playing baseball and just having sports around, I think it made me who I am today. Not in total, but I think it's definitely a big part.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think sports in anyone's life builds discipline, builds confidence, builds teamwork, builds communication, and builds so many things that now in the real world I've been able to apply and have helped me tremendously. Building habits, being disciplined. It comes easier in some way because I have been committed so long to a sport, showing up day after day to practice, that now it's like that transition to new habits. I don't want to say the word easier, but it isn't as harder as someone maybe who hasn't experienced being disciplined at something, at a sport,
Yeah.
and have to create those habits in their life. We have only a couple of minutes left, and I just wanted to give this last minute. If you have anything in mind that you would want to share, if there's any other insights that you'd want to tell the audience.
I would love to. Question yourself. Question yourself and take time out of your night or out of your day before you go to sleep to reflect. Like really reflect on the way you're acting in life. Reflect on the people that you're surrounding yourself with. Really think of the actions that you've been committing to lately. Think on the things that you've been saying to people and just reflect, because when you start to reflect on your actions, when you start to reflect on what you're getting done in life, you start to think and you start to genuinely ask yourself if what I'm doing is right, if what I'm doing is wrong, if what I'm doing is right, if is this what I want. So reflect, reflect. Ask yourself, okay, I want to do this with my life, but I'm spending time hanging out with these people. Is that something that's going to benefit me for what I want out of life? I'm working this job, but is this job really what I need right now? And just reflect. And I feel like the more you reflect, the more you start to build that awareness and that consciousness of your decisions and the things you say to people. And once that is unlocked in your brain, you start to do things with intent, and you start to build that confidence in yourself, and you start to do things truly because it's what you desire to do. And you stop people pleasing, and you stop worrying about other people's judgments and their opinions of you, and you start to become your own person, and you start to just become better
and live an authentic life.
Exactly. Authenticity, brother. That's the most important thing.
Eric, thank you so much, man. Thank you for being here today.
Of course. I had a blast.
It was an incredible conversation. I'm sure that the audience was able to get some insights, and I hope that not only receive this insights but apply it to your own life. Please leave any comments on topics that maybe you would want to hear, things that you took away, things that can be improved. It would help a lot for this podcast to continue moving forward. and impacting more lives. I'm your host, Tulio Hidalgo. Don't forget to subscribe, like, again, comment, and I'll see you on the next episode of Finding Purpose. Bye-bye.